Welcome into another edition of Inside Carolina's Day After podcast. I'm Tommy Ashley. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt. We are live, and Congruity. We are live on Sunday morning, 9 a.m. Per protocol. Buck, I'm going to you. I did not have 41 to 14 on the old bingo card going into yesterday's ball games, but it was good to see that team have some fun. Your overall thoughts as we get into it?
Yeah, it was great to see the team have some fun and for them to have a good result on the year. They've been through a lot. We don't try to get in too much into the sad side of what the football team has had to deal with. But unlike them, we can get away from it. They can't. So um, that part of it aside, it was great to see them have a Saturday afternoon where they could enjoy themselves. Uh, the two themes I have coming out of the game, or to describe the game, is a very good example of complementary football between the offense and the defense. I thought they meshed well together yesterday. And the other piece of it is that just like physics, people in physics define absolute zero as a total absence of heat. Good football seems to be a total absence of mistakes. And North Carolina did not make very many of those yesterday. They didn't have a turnover. They didn't get sacked. Uh, they didn't have a horrible miscue in the game in any shape, form, or fashion. They gave up and Mac Brown was reduced to talking about the one return they gave up for 24 yards. So that just kind of epitomizes how few mistakes they had yesterday. So those are the two things that I came away with from watching the game.
I had four missed tackles too on the game after running those totals up the last couple of weeks. Jason, is it all came in Rucker? I mean, he's been healthy 2 games this year, and they've been pretty dominant on defense in 2 games this year. I mean, the young man. If you look at PFF, I think last week against Georgia Tech, he was dead last on the team. Obviously, he wasn't healthy, but this week he is number one, way number one in those rankings, and certainly played well. Is it him?
It's a big factor. He's a big factor. And we talked about in the game plan podcast about what a difference a bye week could make. You know, how much of a difference does an open date make for this team? Well, obviously it made a big difference for Cayman Rucker because you watch him in the Georgia Tech game and he's still limping around. He's still, a shell of himself. In this game, that was not a shell. That was the real thing. And like you said in Pro Football Focus, a grade of 93.6 overall and 90.7 as a pass rusher. That's getting it done. That's national title All-American level performance. And yeah, he played like an All-American, and they couldn't block him. So, one of the other things we talked about this week, I can't remember if it was on the game plan or if it was on our pregame with Joey. But we talked about not having playmakers at multiple levels on defense. And that, without Cayman Rucker healthy, this defense had been limited to one difference maker on defense. And that's Elijah Huzzy. That's a guy that, okay, well, you can go and he can take away that guy. But without another difference maker on defense, that doesn't really translate to having a defense that can really cause problems. If you add, and this is what we said, if you add another playmaker up front, if you add that guy that they can't block, that they've got to double team or they've got to be aware of, that opens up everything else on defense. Well, Cayman Rucker became that guy again in this game. And so suddenly you go from having one playmaker at a corner position to having two playmakers at two different levels. And all of a sudden the defense goes from below average to being pretty darn good against a Virginia team that's actually moved the football pretty well this year. And, it's pretty simple. If If you have guys that they can't block, it makes things a lot easier on defense.
Yeah, and Buck, we'll stay here on defense. Obviously, the Javari Ritzie, I mean, his best game since Minnesota as well. I can't believe he scored on that play, but he made some plays, and then he got a block from Amari Campbell. But when was the last time you saw a defensive tackle make a play like that in Carolina uniform?
I want to get a piece of show statistics from you first, Tommy. Where are we at in terms of the show, minute-wise? How far are we into the show?
6 minutes.
Well, we're 6 minutes into the show, and we started out talking about defense, and it took us 6 minutes to mention Javari Ritzie's name, who's 6'5", 290 pounds, and ran 84 yards on an interception return. That's an indication of how well the defense just played yesterday. They didn't give up a lot of yards either against the run or the pass. Probably the first game I've seen them play in a long time where they didn't go into it looking as though they were trying to favor one side of the ball, one part of the offense over the other. In other words, I think against Pittsburgh, we saw part of the defense committed to, well, we're not going to let you run the ball, and they threw it for them, miles. And then on the flip side, we're going to concentrate, on trying to prevent you from throwing the ball, and they run it for a country mile. In this game, they played both the run and the pass with almost equal attention. They gave up 281 yards to Virginia in terms of how far they threw the ball. That was only like a 4.2 yards per attempt average, and they did a great job despite that late touchdown that they gave up to the totally uncovered Virginia guy. So they were good against the run and good against the pass, and you can count on one hand the number of times you could say that about any UNC defense.
Yeah, Jason, that's the watching it. We talked about line of scrimmage game, and I want to talk about on the offensive side after we do the defense, but it wasn't just Rucker. I think Rucker is the reason because you have to pay him some attention. But guys like Ritzie and Hester actually stepped up. I mean, Ritzie's going to get all the glory for his play, and it was an amazing run. And people mentioned Peppers, Keith Piner. Peppers was a different animal, and he was not a defensive tackle. I remember Marvin Austin in that UConn game, and then Jim Woodall showing our age on there, remembering those plays. But Ritzie, Hester, Travis Shaw had a few moments. I mean, explain it to me. Explain to me the consistency issue that this team has had to be able to do that and then, do what they've done in the past. What's going on there? And was Collins finally unleashed? We've talked about him being a little neutered, it felt like, in the game plans.
Well, I think having Rucker makes you feel a lot less on the leash. So, again, a lot of what they were able to do boiled down to they were able to stop the run, and then they weren't getting blocked in the pass rush. That's a recipe for looking pretty dominant on defense. And, another guy that you ought to mention there is Bo Atkinson. Bo Atkinson was pretty darn good in this game. And Ty Adams, by the way, as the corner who played in Marcus Allen's usual spot, also played well. But the fact of the matter is that they dominated, like you said, it's line of scrimmage game, and they dominated on the line of scrimmage. I mean, looking at the numbers here, sack adjusted yards per carry. So this is removing sacks from the equation. Virginia averaged 3.9 yards per carry on the day.
You'll take that 8 ways to Sunday.
You're going to be pleased with that, all right? So now 3.9 yards per carry on the day in the running game. That means you're limiting the run game. And then you add to that a bunch of sacks. You add to that How many sacks did they have? They had what, 6 in the
10.
first half?
They had 10.
Yeah, they had 10.
today.
They had 10 total sacks. Well, I mean, a defense is gonna look good when they have 10 sacks. Right? That cures a whole lot of problems. If you're having a rough day in other ways, and you hold a team to 3.9 yards per carry, sack adjusted, and then you add to that 10 sacks, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you won that game. It's real simple. And the thing is, those sacks weren't all on blitzes. Yeah. This wasn't a matter of Collins being unleashed and, he just started blitzing 7-8 guys. No, it was a matter of that defensive end beat that offensive tackle. That defensive tackle beat that offensive guard. And then every so often you did get, like the first sack that I remember was a linebacker. You did get some blitzes, but those are blitzes that they've been running. They just got home because, again, guys won their matchups. And also, I think Virginia is one of the weaker teams up front that Carolina has played so far. That's a factor. But you combine that with Carolina playing better up front than they have, and largely because you've got your best guy back playing at his best. Now that makes things a whole lot easier. So yeah, 10 sacks will make any coordinator's day a lot easier. It suddenly lets you off the leash, or makes you look like you're off the leash. So yeah, I mean, this was one of those games where, it's like the old Tecmo Bowl where, Collins could just mash whichever play he wanted, and it matched up right with the play that they were calling, and he had, Bo Jackson on his side, and, it resulted well.
Buck, who else on the defensive side? I mean, everybody played well. Jason mentioned Huzzy, Ty Adams stepped up. Marcus Allen tried to give it a go after getting dinged in practice this week, and then Ty Adams stepped up. I mean, what I always go to and look at, and I know it's not foolproof, is the PFF grades, and it's just they match the eye test. I thought Desmond Evans played well. Now his PFF grade's not great, but I thought he looked pretty solid out there. I thought Power Echols played one of his better games, and of course, you've got some guys that have struggled at times but really stepped up. But just overall else that we haven't talked about, Buck, on the defensive side, what would you notice? And does it travel? I think it travels. I think teams got talent to win out and be pretty good. But Buck, you get me there on the rest of the defense.
Well, I think probably the big takeaway there is that you may as well consider the entire defense and everybody on it name checked this past week. Stick Lane led them in tackles, for example, and we haven't even mentioned his name to this point. And there are other guys that played very well. Hester had a really good play, and so did Shaw, and a lot of that just shows out on yesterday when you going back to look at the tape. But I don't know that there's any one thing as far as individual performances stood out more to me than the inability of Virginia to really seal either edge of the defense. They had people coming from the left and the right, either Atkinson and Rucker and Evans, and Jacoby Cowan had a terrific game. And a lot of guys were not just having a good game, but they made plays. Their efforts resulted in a made play. So, yeah, I think we could just shower the entire defense with accolades today and ask ourselves, where's that been? I know part of it's been sitting on the bench with Rucker, but the overall effort I just thought was they came out ready to play, and they played the entire game.
I agree there, but your audio is kind of low. Somebody mentioned it in chat. I didn't know if it was just me, but wanted to get that louder. Jason, final thoughts on the defensive side? I mean, I feel like we could talk about it the whole time. Find me something that we haven't talked about that you saw out there. Every time I see Jacoby Cowan make a play, I remember to your scouting report a couple years ago that a few people did not like, if you know what I'm talking about. And it was 100% spot on. And maybe it lit a fire at times, or has. But just something on that defensive side that you in your eye, that you saw that maybe we're not talking about enough, that we haven't mentioned already.
Yeah, and speaking of that scouting report, this year's scouting report said, based on what I'd seen of him, this could be a really good year for him. And so far, it's been a much better year. I think he put in the work and got healthy, for one. I mean, he's never really been healthy at North Carolina, not fully. But defensively, I mean, I don't know. I would say, Caleb Cost was another guy that he's been picked on at different times this year, and he made a couple plays. There's one in particular on the little reverse that they had, the end around, and he came right up and stuck his face in the fan and took a play that, if he doesn't do that, probably goes for a little bit. And that's when he gets a nice pat on the back in film session. I can tell you that. Safety position, they've had some issues at somewhat this year, and again, they weren't as clean there as they'd like to have been, but they weren't. It wasn't terrible. So Will Hardy came in and played pretty well. DeAndre Boykins had the one bust that was not good at all, which is why I think we saw a little bit less of him after that. But the thing is, it's a real luxury to be in a position where fourth quarter you give up a complete and total. I mean, think about what the numbers would have been without that. Without the let's see, that was a 68-yard touchdown. Think about what the numbers would have been without that 68-yard touchdown in this game, and how dominant that was. That tells you kind of where you are, what a luxury it is to be at that point. I mean, here's the best way to do this. Through three quarters, these are the numbers. Virginia had scored 6 points on 146 total yards. They had 24 carries for 0.2 yards per carry. That's including the sacks. They had 5 total rushing yards because of those sacks and 141 passing yards. Average yards per play is 3.0. So, I mean, the final number of 4.1 yards per play factors in that 68-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter, which, skews things a little bit. It was even a little more dominant than it might have been, but yeah, or than it looked, I guess. But yeah, there's still some room for improvement. I mean, I thought Travis Shaw could have played a little better. There were still a few little glitches, little blips in there. But again, it's a real luxury to be dominant enough and to score enough points on the offensive side to where that it didn't matter.
Yeah, we'll talk about the offense on the backside here. Buck, let's talk a little bit of sentimentality here. I've got the title of this show coming together, and the thumbnail for the show is Rucker with Desmond Evans coming together at the quarterback. But just from a mental side of it, and you mentioned earlier everything, but just on the mental side, purely football related, to be able to have some success on the defensive side, it's one of those things where it's happened twice, and we've mentioned Rucker and all that, but we've seen the defense just wilt so many times late in the season. Well, here we're starting to get to the late side of the season. Just that aspect of this performance going forward before we get on the other side of the ball.
Well, I think a good transition from the defense to the offense is, and maybe this parlays into your question as well. I hope it does. But the offense, as I led with in my introductory part, is that this was complementary football. The defense played well, but the offense kept stacking points. And when they did, that influenced what the Virginia's offense approach to the game was. They had to throw the ball more. They concentrated on throwing the ball more, which made it a little bit easier to know what was coming by the defense and a little bit easier for the rush to get there. And that's the two things that related to the defense, I think, that are appropriate is that they got some help from the offense. The offense clearly stayed ahead of the game and put Virginia on their back feet. And that and making the fewest mistakes on the day were the two things I think helped the defense more than anything. So that's where I would leave the subject of the defense.
Jason, let me let you finish here since we're contractually obligated to go a while. I think, first of all, Virginia had issues in the red zone. Carolina was able to hold them to field goals in the first half. But here's where I thought the game was iced, where it was not iced in Durham, because that's what everybody was saying was, remember Durham when they were up at half. Open in the second half, Virginia gets the ball, interception. 3 plays, interception. Virginia gets the ball back. They go 3 and out. Virginia gets the ball back, interception, and that's the Ritzy one. The defense stepped up, whereas they haven't against Duke. How much of that is in that locker room at halftime, you think, saying, look, we've been here before, let's not do it again? How much does that matter to players thinking back of what happened in previous games? Is it a thing, or is it just a thing for the fans to think about, oh, well, they did this 2 weeks ago, let's see if they don't do it again? What's the locker room like there?
Yeah, I'm sure that there was some discussion maybe from coaches saying, okay, guys, we got our lead, but we got to finish. You're going to get that every week. I doubt that was that big of a factor, to be honest. I think it was just a matter of this team came out and did it. It's one of those things. I do sometimes get a little frustrated by commentators who, emphasize like, oh, he just, this team just wanted it more. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes you can tell one team is just playing a lot harder than the other team. And I've talked about that with, the culture at places like Georgia, where those guys play so hard running to the football and all of that. That culture matters. But at the same point, like more often than not, guess what? Coaches and players really, really, really want to win. They like to win, and they want to win. They're invested heavily in winning. And so a lot of times it's not a matter of desire or wanting to win or, okay, we didn't let this happen. Or, we let this happen last year. We're not going to let it happen this year. I think sometimes it's just you go out and this time you do it right and you make the play. I mean, you pointed out the difference is that they had 2 interceptions in the third quarter that iced the game. One by Rucker on a pretty dang nice play, and the other by Ritzy on a very rare play, a play that is a special play. Do you think that Ritzy in the locker room just suddenly had this thing of like, I got to go out and I got to make myself a play because last year this didn't go right, so I got to figure out a way to tip the ball to myself? No, it just happened. He just made a play. And this year, this team did that. That's the difference. And I don't think it's a matter of like, well, this year they wanted to make the play better. No, this year they just did, and they were in better position. You get in better position by doing your job, by winning one-on-one matchups, by, those additional things. And I think, Collins did a good job of having them in the right spots, but that's that.
Yeah, I found it interesting that a lot of Mac's comments earlier in the week was the coaches have to do what they're supposed to do, but in the end, the players have to play and the players have to execute. Carolina certainly did it on defense. Talk about Johnny T-shirt, johnnytshirt.com here before we flip it. Get the link up there. Johnny T-shirts, of course, the place to get your swag. You can get that white throwback jersey at Johnny T-shirt. I thought they looked nice. I found the choice of uniforms interesting, given I believe probably the last time they wore those up in Virginia was the nameless game. But it worked out, and Johnny T-shirt can outfit you there. They also can get you the basketball gear, the baseball gear, anything you want at Johnny T-shirt, and the great customer service from the whole crowd there. And 10% off your order if you're an Inside Carolina Premium subscriber. Unbelievably, it's almost Christmas time. Get your Johnny T-shirt gear for your loved ones, your friends, your family. Get all the Carolina gear at Johnny T-shirt. Support the local businesses. National guys will pay the bills. It's the day after, 41-14 in Charlottesville. Okay, Buck, I see you dropped your column to me for me to post. I'm not going to look at it, but I'm going to talk about the offense because I want to get it clean from your ears. I was impressed. I was not impressed with the first drive, and I was not impressed with running a reverse, whatever was going on. But I thought it's all about execution, but I thought the game plan against Virginia to get some success for these guys was a good one from Chip.
I think the lead here for the offense is that this was not a game where the passing attack was second fiddle to the running game. Now, Hampton got over 100 yards and he got 2 touchdowns, but North Carolina's run game was not nearly as dominant against Virginia as it has been against some teams they played against in losses. They only got, we're talking about the 3.9 sack-adjusted yards per carry or whatever earlier for Virginia. North Carolina got 3.4 less than what Virginia did as far as running the ball. I think a couple of things are happening with North Carolina's offense, or at least it showed in this game. Tomorrow they may be awful. They may go back to not being good at all. But against Virginia, they threw the ball well. And a couple of things contribute to that. One is that the offensive line is pass blocking better. And I think that shows up, and maybe it's showing up in the PFF grades. I haven't looked at them. But there were a couple of times, and this goes beyond just the pass blocking. There were offensive tackles downfield blocking for runs, on completed passes and for in the run game. I saw Howard Sampson. He's like 30 yards down the field blocking for a runner. And you saw a little of that from Trev Green. You haven't seen a lot of that from North Carolina's offensive tackles going back beyond this particular year, where you've got guys that sort of hustle play, which is what it is for an offensive lineman to defeat his block and then get 30 yards downfield and continue to block so you can have success moving the ball is different. The other thing is Criswell has a better internal clock than we've seen in Mac Brown 2.0 in terms of when to get rid of the ball and how willing he is to get rid of the ball. Maybe Howell and May just took more chances and therefore took more sacks. But one of the reasons North Carolina didn't have any sacks yesterday is because Criswell got rid of the ball. And I don't think we could get out of this particular lead into the offense without talking about J.J. Jones. Beautiful catch in the end zone. I'm still not sure from my vantage point whether he was in or out of the end zone. But at least the camera work for the CW couldn't overturn the call. So in any event, the one thing about all that is this. I don't know how many people have thought about this, but this is the only game in Jones's career that he's had more than one touchdown catch. He had 2 touchdown catches in this game. His previous high touchdown mark was 1. He's not been a red zone threat for North Carolina in his career. But he was against Virginia yesterday, and that may be a one-off, maybe against other teams down the road. That's not going to happen. But that is a benchmark game for him to have multiple touchdown catches in a game. So congrats to JJ. And, you know, I still think there's too many drops in the wide receiver core, and I still wish that one of the younger receivers would just step up and seize the day as far as a role in the passing attack. But overall, the passing attack did what it needed to do yesterday, and they were opportunistic. They picked up 13 points off of turnovers, which, you know, when you can do that, that's a big bonus towards a win. So kudos to them, and congrats on getting over 1,000 yards for Hampton. But the offense yesterday leaned on their passing attack and came away winning rather than leaning on their running game as they have done most of this year.
Jason, let's start on the line. I texted during the game. There were some plays where we've seen it the other way around, but there were some plays where North Carolina's offensive line was plowing the road and moving Virginia's complete defensive line well off the ball. You know, I haven't looked yet. I need to. I'd be interested to see what Hampton's yards were after contact. Probably could find it, but it's not good radio. What'd you think about their play? You know, Willie Lampkin, Blasky, they've been solid. Banfield is healthy. Buck mentioned Sampson and Travion Green downfield. But just looking at the line of scrimmage, you're a line of scrimmage guy. Offensive line yesterday, I thought they looked good on the whole, especially in some of those positions where they just mauled Virginia's defensive line.
Yeah, it's advantageous when you're able to just line up and run the ball. As we talked about on the other side of the ball, you know, that when you limit them to 3.9 yards per carry, sack adjusted, that really helps your football team. When on the flip side, when you're able to sack adjusted run for more, now Carolina normally has a better number there, that helps. Thing is, in this game, Carolina didn't run at will. What you had in this game was they blocked well enough for Hampton to run for 4 yards a carry. That's not a whole lot more. I mean, it's 4.0. It's not a whole lot more than that 3.9. Criswell had some success. He had a couple pulls and actually ran for some first downs that mattered, that converted some things. But what you saw in this game was it's a luxury to be able to block well enough to where Virginia has to commit so much to stopping Hampton. And then the place where Carolina won this game, you brought up J.J. Jones, 5 catches for 129 yards, two scores. Nate McCollum, 4 for 57. No touchdowns, but a couple big plays. The place where Carolina won this game on the offensive side was Jacoby Criswell consistently putting the ball in the right spot. When Virginia, you say line of scrimmage game, yes, that's why Virginia had to commit so much to what they did. But things got much easier for Criswell in the offense because of that. And Carolina had a couple nice counters in this. They were able to get some big yards twice on receiver screens, one of which was one where Sampson was downfield, like Buck mentioned. But for the most part, this was just a matter of getting the ball out and getting it out quickly and winning some matchups on the outside, which they've not done a ton of this year. All of a sudden, a team has to focus on your All-American at running back, and then you're able to get the ball out. Now, they were able to block a little bit in terms of pass protection. I think on the whole they had a decent day, but you still struggle a little bit at the one tackle, especially. I mean, I think Trevion Green still had some struggles in pass blocking. Had the one big holding penalty. Had the one he got beat to the quarterback pretty bad. Sampson had a pretty good day pass blocking, and the rest were okay. But on the whole, I think the biggest difference is that Criswell and the receivers were able to take care of their business to complement what the offensive line's been able to do as a run unit, as a run blocking unit.
Yeah, we got Buck. You said it, and Jason, you mentioned we got to give props to JJ. I heard him in the post game talk about the noise on social media, and he's right. He's caught it from this show at times, but he stepped up and played well the run after the catch. And then, Buck, I agree. When I saw that touchdown pass at the end of the half, and when it happened live, I was like, "There's no way he caught that in bounds." But I think he got that foot down for sure. But at any rate, it was a touchdown, and then the run after the catch I thought was good. He's really played well the last couple of weeks. Let's sort of stay on Jacoby Criswell here, because Jason, I'm gonna ask Buck, and then I'm gonna come to you, and I want you to explain whether you saw any tweaks to what Carolina's trying to do, or it was just Criswell. But Buck, Max Johnson, they always bring up Connor Harrell, who, if you watch Connor Harrell on the sidelines, he's just been a great teammate given what's going on. But Criswell's play, I've thought for the most part all season, has been good enough for this team to win ball games. But to our point here, 19 for 30, 293, threw the ball away when he needed to. The completion percentage was a little higher than it has been, which is a good thing. He spread the ball around. He checked down. Carolina can win with this guy, Buck, and they can score 41 points when they didn't run it well. I think for me that's one of the biggest things here is that they didn't run it well, but they still scored 41 points or 34 points if you take away the pick six. Does this travel? Does Criswell's growth continue the upward trajectory, Buck, and how important it is that for Carolina to end the season on a solid winning note?
Well, if the question is whether it's repeatable down the road, your answer is as good as mine, because over the last 5 years, we've seen North Carolina have a good day defensively or a good day offensively, and tried to extrapolate from that some huge improvement going forward. I don't know that we can do that, because our experience is that inconsistency is the most consistent thing about this team, or the program as it's been around for several years. You would like to think so. You'd like to think that this would travel and be repeatable down the line. You brought out a couple of points, which I'll elaborate on a little bit. This is the first time Criswell has thrown the ball for more than 60% in a game. He almost had 300 yards throwing it. It was 293. It was his highest passing yardage of his year. And his pass yards per pass attempt were a very impressive 9.5. We've got company, guys. So say good morning. The thing about that is that those two marks, the fact that Criswell just now exceeded the 60% and almost 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, and was a big contributor, as Jason said, in the running game. Yes, he can win. North Carolina can win with this guy. He is, I said last week, I thought that Criswell had moved beyond the game manager uh, model of quarterback play into being somebody who can be a playmaker for North Carolina. And his ability to run and pick up first downs on the run, um, and he had 3 passes of over 30 yards in this game, which is unusual for him and helps account for that yards per attempt average. But a better long game than we've seen from him to date. If it travels, that's a great thing for North Carolina, and they could. This may not be their last win of the season if they can make that hold up over the remaining 5 games of the year or 4.
Jason, one thing I felt like Criswell did is not only we talk about game manager all the time, but he managed the pocket better than he had. Now he backed himself into getting popped a couple times, but what did you see from him growth-wise in this game that maybe we hadn't seen? Stepping into the pocket, rolling out of trouble rather than sliding into it, things like that. Did you notice anything that maybe he really grew over that bye week that he hadn't been doing well, and maybe it's just finally clicked for him?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that he looked like Buck, you mentioned the clock in his head. I thought the clock was a little bit better in this game, and I think it's gotten progressively better over the course of the season. But when he first got in there early on, you could see that he was more comfortable than what we had seen from the other guys this year in terms of just the sort of feel that he brings to the pocket. But in this game, I thought that he took another step forward there, and partly because he found ways to step up rather than stepping into pressure from the outside. I mean, the tackles continue to have some trouble blocking some of the speed rush stuff. He made sure that he didn't get too deep, and he was able to step up. Now, that also means that the guards did a better job. The guards and center did a better job of giving him a place to step up. But he did a good job of basically coming to the right spots in the pocket and getting the ball off. There were very few situations where I was, sitting there going, oh, come on, get rid of it. What are you doing? He played a clean game. And so, yeah, I mean, I wonder how much of that is due to, again, Virginia not being able to do much on the interior. And, I guess we'll see that this week. But yeah, I thought it was a nice incremental step forward in that respect.
Yeah, it's a great point about the guards, Banfield, Blasky, and Lampkin keeping it for there to be a place to step up into. That's a lot of people often say, step into the pocket. Well, if you got somebody in your face, it's a problem. But yeah, the tackles, especially Travion Green, he's got to figure it out a little better and avoid those hits. Chip Perrin in the chat asked, "Where's my visitor?" I'm solo, man. I'm just chilling at the house. I don't have a dog. I don't have a cute baby girl to sit with me. It's just old man in clouds here. We're talking with Buck Sanders and Jason Staples on the Inside Carolina Day After podcast. Carolina beats the brakes off Virginia in Charlottesville. We're going special teams. Everybody wants to talk about special teams. I just don't know if special teams are fixable at this point. The punting, if a receiver's going to catch the rugby punt, you reduce the effectiveness of a rugby punt. So that's the thing. Can't really fault Burnett missing a 51-yarder, even though he's certainly capable of making that. So that's my talk. Buck, you got anything on special teams that's worth talking about? I think the punting is what it is at this point. And you just hope that they've cured the block issues. I don't think Virginia really came after any. But I'll let you get a word on special teams before I turn to a game next week that our center guest here might have a little bit of knowledge about.
Unless I was daydreaming, North Carolina recovered an onside kick as well, didn't they? Or was that a different game?
I think you were watching a different game.
Might have been a different game. But let's just say that they didn't give up an onside kick. How about that? And that's a win.
They recovered Virginia's onside kick. Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
Oh, now I feel less addled in my senior years.
When you were talking, I was like, what game was he watching? But yes, I believe it was Culliver or snatched an onside kick, or maybe it was Hamilton. One of those two young receivers made a nice play.
So, I'm counting that as a win. If they recover that onside kick, um, North Carolina is not always great at that. I think Gene said it was Hamilton that recovered that kick.
Yeah,
So,
second.
as long as they didn't get a kick blocked, give up a touchdown return, as the absence of mistakes, as we kind of talked about earlier, contributes to that absolute zero temperature as better than anything. So just eliminating mistakes. And do you remember a game or two earlier in the year when basically all we saw were mistakes? Um, just mistake after mistake after mistake. And so if just a good reminder to us all, if you eliminate the mistakes, you're going to probably come out better at the end of the day.
Indeed, and somebody mentioned Huzzy in the chat. Catch the punts. Even if you don't return them, and he's capable of returning them, just catch the punts. We'll talk about congruity, congruityhr.com. Go to Matt at congruityhr.com. Get your free small to mid-sized business assessment. The email's down there at the bottom of the screen. Sponsors, another great sponsor of Inside Carolina, and they're a local business that's turned it into a national business. Matt at congruityhr.com. Tell them Inside Carolina sent you. You get that free assessment to see what they can do to grow your business. And they do the heavy lifting while you concentrate on that business, getting it off the ground, getting it rolling. Maybe they'll turn you into a national brand as well. So Congruity and Johnny T-Shirt, great sponsors. Jason, I'm going to let you opine on the week ahead. We saw what happened to Florida State against Miami. I don't know if anybody was surprised by that result. And I love listening to the Unconquered podcast. I will give Jason's props. Unconquered hot take podcasts are the ones right after the game. They're fantastic. If you think Staples riffs here for a long period of time, go listen to that show. And you riff, 20 to 30 minutes on Florida State's issues. I can't lie. I enjoy them a lot. I don't listen to a ton of other sports podcasts. But Jason, Florida State, Carolina, it's been a house of horrors again for Mac Brown. He has not had any success against his former alma mater and Florida State. But your take here going forward, can Carolina's play travel, and can Florida State figure it out before the Tar Heels get to town? What do you expect to see Saturday?
Yeah, Florida State has been a mess. I mean, everybody knows that at this point. There's no talking around that. And those hot take podcasts could go for, we talk about, plucking all the feathers off the bird. Well, here in the Florida State case, there's so many feathers on that bird of failure that those could go for an hour or two after each loss. But no, it's been interesting to see what's happened down there. It's been a complete train wreck of a season, obviously. Thing is, that's a team that is a little dangerous in Carolina's situation, just because of how much they bring to the table as on the defensive line. They've got a couple of NFL defensive tackles. They've got some guys on the edge that can speed rush, which is a bit of a problem for Carolina. That's been a problem. So, you expect this to be a lot more of a challenge for the Carolina offense than, say, Virginia was, and several of the teams that Carolina has played. Thing is, Florida State has not scored over 21 points this year.
That's crazy.
They're averaging 15 points a game, and they have not scored. They scored 21 points in the opener against Georgia Tech and have not done so since. They've not scored over 20 points since. So, this is a Florida State team that, you almost feel like if you can score 20, 24 points, if you're Carolina, you probably win the football game. Because Florida State hasn't shown that they can score over 21 points this year, and I'm not sure they can score over 24 on air right now. So, they are really banged up on the offensive line, and even before that, they were. If there's a more disappointing team in the country on the offensive line than this team, I don't want to see them. you do not want to see it because the level of play on the offensive line at Florida State has been really poor. And so that again, with Rucker, he's going to have some advantages on Florida. Both of Florida State's tackles are going to have a hard time in this game. I think the interior might be a little better, but only a little bit better. I mean, this is a team that coming into the year, they were one of the, I think, 4 or 5 most experienced offensive lines in terms of starts and snaps. And they've played like one of the 5 or 6 worst offensive lines in the Power 5. So you expect to get some pressure on them. You expect to be able to bottle up their run game. And then you combine that with they lead the Power 5, or at least they did last I checked. They lead the Power 5 in drops. From the tight end, wide receiver, and running back rooms. I actually went through it, and based on EPA, or based on, EPA lost, essentially, they've cost themselves probably 4 losses on the season, if not 5. I would say 4 losses on the season with just the certain drops that they've had. If they catch the football like a normal team does, this team's probably sitting here right now as a 3-loss team instead of a 7-loss team. So they're probably 4-3 if they just catch it like a normal team. What that means is that they're a dangerous team. You watch their game against Duke, you watch Carolina's game against Duke, and you go, okay, Carolina and Florida State are roughly comparable teams in terms of what they bring to the table. So I expect it to be a close game. I expect it to be an entertaining game. But I don't expect it to resemble top quality football either. It's like I said, it's a dangerous game for Carolina, but certain areas right now, Carolina's just clicking a lot better than that Florida State team.
Run up to Carolina and Florida State, Buck. I'm looking at your column. Closing thoughts here. How many times are you going to give me props on my game predictions? I may not get the season predictions right, but game to game, you got to give me some love. I'm nailing these things pretty much.
Well, I did give you the love in today's column.
I know. I'm looking at it. It's like slight edge to Tommy. I mean, can we translate that into FanDuel or DraftKings or something? I can't seem to get that done. But close us out, Buck.
Well, I think the main thing, we've talked about a lot of stuff and whether it'll translate the next week or, how the rest of it's going to play out. Previewed a little bit Florida State. But the main thing that, the takeaway that I share with a lot of people, apparently, if you look at the Tar Pit Premium message board, which if you're not a premium subscriber, you should be, is that a lot of people are just happy for the team. That, they had a great team, a great game. They had a great experience. They were able to experience some joy in their lives from playing the football game. And be on the right side of the scoreboard at the end of it. And 41-14, nobody saw that coming. But if they haven't had a lot of high points this year, but yesterday was one of them.
Carolina moves to 4-4 in the season. Got Florida State and Tallahassee. I believe they announced that game time at 3:30 next Saturday. It was a bucket list trip for me preseason, not so much now. Won't be making that trip. Stay tuned to Inside Carolina for Taylor Vipolis' show. Stay tuned for press coverage where our beat guys discuss an issue. The game plan will be Thursday night with Greg, Jason, and myself. And as always, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday, today, shortly, Bucks columns knocking it out. And, of course, basketball coverage as well this week with a scrimmage today at 2 o'clock. Shout out to the 300 and almost 50 people that watched us throughout the almost hour of the show. Shout out to everybody that is taking part in the Inside Carolina ride that we are on this season. It's always a pleasure. Johnny T-shirt and Congruity. Buck, Jason, it's always fun, boys. We shall talk again soon.